Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I am JR, and we are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. We appreciate you being here, joining us for another episode of Big Jeff's Insights. Going to have a great time with Jeff picking his 5 games in the Big Ten this week, and also taking a look at last week. What did he learn? What did he go through? What did he observe? And we'll talk through it all. I'm going to kick it to Jeff now. And Jeff, I understand your son played this weekend, correct? How'd that go?
Played first time coming back from injury. He didn't catch a pass, but he had some good blocks. But it's right before halftime, he was in the slot, and our best receiver ran a post route, and the safety went with him, and Preston ran to the corner of the end zone. He was wide open, but the quarterback, if he would have delayed it like a second more, he would have saw him. Instead, he threw into double coverage for an incompletion. It would have been a touchdown right before halftime. First catch ever on varsity, touchdown. Instead, nothing. So such a shame, but we won the game 13-0, and he played, and he came out injury-free, so that's good.
There you go. That's all you can ask for. Injury-free, got the playing time. Love to hear about it. All right. Well, Jeff, let's go ahead and jump into what we have here. Let's take a look at what you predicted last week, what you got right, what you got wrong, and then go through what you learned from these games as well.
Oh, that looks like this week's picks. You show the other.
I did put the wrong one there. All right, go ahead. I'll fix it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just so I went 3-2 last week. I'm creeping back up to 500. 2 straight weeks of going 3-2. It's been tough choosing these early games, frankly, with the weak non-conference schedule that the Big Ten teams have had. It's really hard to get a good handle on how good they are until they start playing better teams. So, JR, I would kind of use that as an excuse to explain why I'm 12-13 on the year. So that's just one game below 500, and of course this is against the spread, so they're not easy. But I think we're getting a better feel for these teams now that we're in the Big Ten season. Doesn't mean the predictions are going to be easy, but I think the unknowns are less than they were, when we had all these terrible non-conference games going on. So that's the good thing. And while you're bringing that up, JR, the 2 games I got wrong, the biggest one, I had my Lock City game as USC covering 6.5 over Illinois. A lot of that was based on my belief in USC. It's not like I didn't think Illinois was no longer a really good team. All along, JR, I've been pretty consistent with Illinois. I've just never felt they were a top 10 team, but I've always felt they were top 25. And the loss to Indiana had me questioning even maybe the top 25. But after they beat USC, they're kind of back to what I thought in the preseason, right? Illinois is a legit top 25 team, but they just have too many issues and little weaknesses and maybe not enough talent to say, yeah, top 10, could make a playoff run. Just really disappointed in USC, though. Their offense was looking great. And I know, they were traveling, so that's always a risk in choosing a team like that. But I really felt, based on how much they would score, that they would cover that 6.5. They've been their own worst enemy. In the opening drive, they were driving, and then they had a bad fumble. And that's exactly what Illinois needed, right? A dose of confidence and kind of that belief. And USC had a few injuries, but really good teams are able to overcome good injuries to still win games. So it really tells me, JR, USC is the bottom line for them. They got beat in the trenches, and that's just been their reputation. Are they good enough in the trenches to win and be a top-level Big Ten team and really challenge for the Big Ten title? I think they're going to get there. Their recruiting is improving tremendously. But based on that Illinois result, I have to say they're not good enough this year in the trenches. I still think they're going to have a good season, but their ceiling is limited unless they really improve. And then just the penalties and all that kind of stuff. Although I think that's kind of the nature of a Lincoln Riley aggressive team, to be honest with that. So that's the first one. The other one I got wrong, Indiana against Iowa. I had Indiana covering the 7.5. Of course, that turned out to be a dogfight, rock fight, if you will. I actually think it's super encouraging for Indiana. I think it's way better for Indiana that they didn't blow out Iowa. I really believe that teams, to be battle tested for the playoffs, if you haven't been playing a lot of close games, when you do get into that close game, you're going to struggle. So having that road and struggle through and finding a way to win, I think that's a huge deal for Indiana, because, when you don't have your A game and still win, that's a sign of a really good football team. So just a great win. And in the past, Indiana would have lost that game, right? Big win. Illinois, telling people telling Indiana how great they are. That's when they've usually lost, and especially on the road at Iowa. So just really impressive. And overall for Indiana, my take is their defense, similar to last year, is legit top 10. I'm like super impressed. They went against the statistically best offensive line in the Big Ten and really held their own. I do think the offense, similar to last year, is top 25 but not top 10. I'm worried about that offensive line. We'll really find out against an Oregon, against the big dogs. Will that offensive line struggle like they did last year against Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State? So we're going to find that out. But I think the other thing is, I think Mendoza is better than Rourke. So overall, I think Indiana is even better than last year. And that win at Iowa really put them in a great position to potentially make the playoffs. So what I got right, the Ohio State win, felt real good about that. Even though I think really highly of Washington. Amazing that, Washington with this dynamic offense, three-headed monster with Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston at receiver. He had scored on 25 consecutive drives, 75% third down conversion rate, and Ohio State held them to 1 of 11 on third downs, only 234 yards. Just an incredible thing. And so one of the things I did this week, JR, I kind of started a new source. I've told people I listen to a lot of podcasts to kind of, to make sure what I think is not off base, to get different people's opinions. So Todd McShay's podcast I tuned into, really good stuff there. I can tell you, he was lauding before that game that Ohio State would have their hands full with those three, and including led by the quarterback, Damon Williams Jr. And after he watched that tape, basically McShay was like, Ohio State is the gold standard defense in football, of college football right now. They are hands down the best. He said, we all heard about their linebackers, Sonny Styles, Arval Reese, how well they're playing, the best tandem really in the nation. But he was amazed that the defensive line, that was the biggest question mark, against Washington, the gaps and the soundness of their fits as they just held Damon Williams within the pocket, their relentlessness. He just couldn't say enough about just how overall Ohio State's defense looked. And we already know that back end is awesome with Caleb Downs and everything. So just, to hear him rave about them, he still feels Washington's a top 25 team. It's just Ohio State's defense was that good. And then both him and Joel Klatt, who I do listen to, they both think Ohio State is only putting this thing in third gear right now. Of all the teams, also, they do think they're number one, but they also think their ceiling is even higher than other teams because they don't really believe that offense has really put it out of third gear yet. And that's something I'm going to hit on later, the quote controversy of how conservative Ohio State's offense has been. So that's that one. Hey, JR, I do want to get into a little of Oregon Penn State, but before that, maybe stop here. Do we want to see who's in listening on the chat? Maybe a little bit here.
Yeah, we got a Illini Bubba here using the Brett Bielema picture there. Appreciate that, Illini Bubba. Yeah, I love that. Love that picture of Bielema there that I put in there. Max says, "What's up with the potential $2 billion Big Ten private equity investment? Private equity firms look to Look for 15 to 20% returns in college endowment funds. Target 66% to 9% returns. They also invest in a private equity fund. Yeah, I'm going to do a video on that for tomorrow. I unfortunately, college football with Sam is under the weather, so he will not be able to do the video with me tomorrow. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that private equity fun video, so you guys will at least have something tomorrow, so I'm not completely silent. But yeah, I'll do a video on that. We're going to stick with Jeff's picks and everything in this one, but look for that to come out tomorrow, Max. Let's see. Max asked about your son, Jeff. You said he played, correct?
Yeah, Max, he played. He didn't catch a pass blocked well. He was wide open for a touchdown before halftime, but our quarterback, who's one of his best friends, by the way, which is ironic, didn't see him, so didn't throw to him. It would have been a 30-yard touchdown before halftime. But we feel good. He came out injury-free and looking to have a good rest of the season. So thanks for asking.
There you go. There you go. And the Penn State guy, he's giving us his locks. He says Clemson covers the minus 13 over UNC is a lock. Belichick's girlfriend told him to lock it in. That's a pretty substantial source there, Penn State guy. Two best bets, Clemson minus 13, Illinois minus 9 over Pursuit. Pursuit, that's a new nickname. Just kidding. They're Penn State guy. Purdue is who he's talking about there. So, yeah, I agree with you. And then last one here, Penn State guy says, I like Texas 5.5 over Florida. Texas D will have Lagway throwing 3 interceptions. I mean, if that offense looks anything like it has so far this season at Florida, yeah. The people who said Lagway was the best quarterback in the nation looking pretty silly right about now. So that's how it goes. And one more. Penn State guy says, I have a better chance of getting open versus Ohio State than Penn State wide receivers. I run a killer down and out. We'll have to get that on the film at some point.
I got to comment on that in a second that you might not like. Penn State.
Let's go ahead. Get into the Penn State stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the fourth one here. I got right. I chose Oregon mostly because I didn't Dan Lanning in big games over James Franklin, but also I didn't think Allar. I thought he would make some good plays, but not enough, and that's kind of, I guess, true. A lot here on Penn State. I guess I don't want to go super deep, but I do want to get into it because McShay. I really wanted to get his opinion on Drew Allar and. Just my personal observation, though, on the Penn State offense, I just think other teams don't believe they're going to throw the ball downfield. So when you're playing defense against Penn State, it's almost like you can play red zone defense. Like everything within 15 yards, you don't believe they're going to go weak. And so that's why it looks so hard, JR, to me for Penn State is because other teams are just saying they know they can't throw deep. Obviously, Allar, that's not a strength of his. So we're just going to play like it's almost red zone, and it just looks like a slugfest, right? I mean, that's why they struggle so much. Oregon deserves huge praise for a huge win, though. I mean, that's one of the first things we should say. No matter what the state of Penn State's offense is, to go into that environment and win, and they still have a very young quarterback, right, in Dante Moore, so just super impressive. And I can tell you this, Todd McShay thinks Dante Moore is the best pure passer right now in college football. I mean, he is gaga over Dante Moore. And when you saw some of the things he did, who can blame him? And he thought that before the game, let alone after the game. But I could tell you, so just insights on that is McShay, the challenge for Penn State really is McShay just really believes that Allar at this point is not that great of a quarterback. He's got some things. He loves his competitiveness. He loves his big arm, but that big arm is more like as McShay put it, he can drive the ball well. Like if a guy's open standing there, he can throw and zip it, but he doesn't throw with any anticipation. He can't do the layered throws where it's more of like touch layered throws. And so he's required to throw like these out routes and hooks and, comebackers and things like that. And it only makes sense, like last year, they had the great tight end and he thrived, but Some of those balls were downfield, but a lot of that were intermediate throws and things like that. And he's throwing to a big target, right? So it's not really tight at windows. So it's your big target who's bigger than the cornerbacks he's guarding. And so really McShelley is basically like, it's just Penn State's offense is limited with Drew Allar. It is what it is now. And I agree, Jared, when you think about how long do we take to say, well, if Drew Allar breaks out, no, he's not breaking out. I'm not saying and by the way, McShay's not saying he's a bad quarterback, and I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. He's just not going to be a star. He's just not a star. He's not a first-round draft pick. He's not going to be that. And so that limits what Penn State can do, but Penn State needs to, through Andy Cignetti, come up with a game plan that takes advantage of what he can do, including he can run the ball, as we've seen, right? So they need to kind of go back to the drawing board. Whatever they're doing is not working. I can tell you another thing that was mentioned, the receivers. It's not been the receivers all along. It never has been the receivers. If you look at the receivers, let's look at it here. So the Harrison Wallace from last year, he's at Ole Miss right now. He's leading Ole Miss in receptions, 361 yards, 21 yards per catch. 21 yards per catch. He's sixth in the SEC in receiving. And he was part of that receiving crew. And, Penn State has bad receivers. No, they didn't. Keandre Lambert-Smith from 2 years ago, drafted in the 5th round and after he played at Auburn. He's playing for the Chargers right now in the NFL. So it's never been about the receivers. The receivers now are probably damn good. It's not them. It's Allar's lack of being able to throw certain throws, and it's Cignetti not designing an offensive game plan that takes advantage of what Penn State can do best, JR. I mean, that's the bottom line. The only other thing I want to say about that too is I made a joke, JR, in the post game about, in the chat, I said, isn't it weird that James Franklin is the only head coach who doesn't call offensive plays, and yet he's got like a call sheet the size of a kitchen table that he's looking at constantly and everything. What is he doing? Let your offensive coordinator make the play calls on the headset. If you don't like it, you can, but it's like he's micromanaging or something. And whatever he's doing, he needs to totally change. And it feels like he has his hands too much in the offensive game plan in my book, JR. And so I just have, real concerns about Penn State as they go forward. They have enough talent and their defense is good enough. I don't think it's going to fall off the table, go 7-5. I know you and Zach discussed that for a little bit. I don't think either of you really believe that. I don't see that happening, but there is a threat here that Penn State won't make the playoffs, right? And if that doesn't happen, that's a complete disaster for James Franklin. So I know I kind of threw a lot of stuff there, and that's really my last one because I took Minnesota over Rutgers, but that one's a little secondary in my view. No offense to those two teams. It wasn't a good win for Minnesota. But JR, any thoughts on that on Penn State? I know it's really kind of the hottest topic for the Big Ten right now, beyond how well Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State are playing right now.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State, it's probably one of the most down anybody's ever been on a team that just went to double overtime against the number 2 team in the nation. It's just kind of crazy. We've had comments on it where people are like, why are you guys so down on Penn State? They went to double overtime against the number 2 team in the nation. And it's like, well, this is what we've seen. This is what, you hope for improvement this year, but at a certain point, when you never really see improvement from the quarterback position and you just continue to see the same thing over and over and over again, you start to say it's not fixing. Nothing is getting fixed here. It is what it is. This team is what it is. They might have older players on it, but better linebacker play, which it has been better this season, but unfortunately Tony Rojas is out now. But better play from another position is not going to fix all your issues at quarterback when your quarterback, can't be a difference maker for you.
Yeah, and I would just say, too, even if Penn State would have pulled that out, the reality is they scored in the fourth quarter, but how many times do you see when a team gets up and then all of a sudden their defense goes from attack mode to kind of prevent mode? There was a little bit of that going on. I really believe that. That usually happens. I mean, we see that in games all the time where a team looks like they have it locked and the other team really comes back. Credit to Penn State for that. But even if they would have pulled it out, the red flags were there on that offense, no matter what, right? Now, granted, if they would have won, it would have been a much better dynamic. But I think a lot of people would have been saying, is this team good enough to win it all? The difference is people would have been like, they're in a great position to make the playoffs, right? So I think that is the difference. It wouldn't have been like James Franklin's job's on the line, but it would have been more like, can this team really win it all? I think would have been the conversation. But that's a much better conversation to have for Penn State for sure.
Yeah. Right now, Penn State's teetering on somewhere between 11-1 this season and 9-3, maybe even 8-4. But I'll say 9-3 is the floor. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the picks this week then, JR.
All right, on FanDuel, we've got Minnesota going and visiting Ohio State. Ohio State is favored by 23.5. The over-under is set at 43.5. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this one?
So just, Minnesota, Darius Taylor's been out. Any word on him, JR? I haven't seen anything. I don't think we'll probably find out.
PJ Fleck's not going to get any word out.
Yeah, the other problem, the number 2 running back for Minnesota is out, AJ Turner. He's out for the year, actually. I read that. He is out for the year. So against Rutgers, Rutgers not very good defense, Gophers had 38 yards rushing. 38 yards rushing at 2.2 yards per carry. So it's all up to Drake Lindsey to try to do something. I just think, and we're going to get into that, against Ohio State, that's a tough road to hoe. So, just want to point out, too, Minnesota's lost 27 of the past 28 to Ohio State. The last win in Columbus was 2000. Right. So this would be a colossal upset if they were able to pull this out. But let's get into 3 reasons why Ohio State can cover that 23.5. So this is getting back to the conservative nature of Ohio State, JR. I know you have a pretty strong opinion on it. To me, this is the perfect setting at home with a young quarterback like Julian Sandy's neck. 4 starts under his belt, including 2 really tough games, Washington and Texas. This is the chance to open things up more. Now, I'm not saying they're going to dramatically change and just be throwing all over the field. But, I think they've been conservative because their defense is even better than they thought it was, and they've been able to do that and still win. The receivers and tight ends are the strength of the offense, and the other teams know the running backs for Ohio State aren't quite as good as last year. So they're looking to stop the pass and make Ohio State run, right? And Ohio State's been reasonably successful, but not as successful as they'd like. And then I think you're just seeing deep safety looks kind of like Texas did against Ohio State. And so Ohio State's just taking what the defense could give them. And despite being so conservative, JR, Ohio State is against the spread. Not only are they 4-0, they're 3-0-1 versus the spread, right? So they're still beating the spread despite this ultra conservative offense. So I really think, JR, in this game, if Ohio State is still ultra conservative, then we know that's probably going to be the case for most of the year. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think they're going to open it up more this Saturday night against Minnesota. So that's one. The other thing is I think Ohio State has the opportunity to get the running game going more. Minnesota ranks really well against the run, but their competition up to playing Rutgers was really bad. California wasn't a running team. They're more of a passing team. So Antoine Raymond for Rutgers had 161 yards rushing, 6.2 yards per carry, a lot of success. I look at Bo Jackson, who's clearly emerged as the number 1 guy for Ohio State. He's got 297 yards. He's averaging 8.5 yards per carry. The only reason Ohio State's stats aren't great is because they're spreading the carries, and they're going to continue to do that for sure because they know even if they have a bell cow like Bo Jackson, you don't want to wear him down. So Peoples is going to get his carries, and the other running back's going to get their carries. But I think Jackson has a chance to maybe have one of those mega games, right? He's popped one big run, I think, this year, but he's got breakaway ability big time. He's still 3rd among Big Ten running backs in breakaway percentage. So that's a stat Pro Football Focus. So again, I see a big plays coming against the Gopher defense there. And then I alluded to this earlier, a one-dimensional Minnesota offense. They can't run the ball unless they get Taylor back. Then things are much different. But if they don't, against an elite defense, if you're one-dimensional, you're in deep trouble. And I just worry about how good Lindsey is, right? Is he good enough to carry the day? So I think their ability to cover 23.5 really is going to depend on Taylor, being able to play in the game. Why take the points with Minnesota? 2 reasons. They do have a solid defense. If Ohio State continues that conservative play calling, Minnesota very well could cover the 23.5, right? Because they're a solid team that can move the ball some, but I don't think that's going to happen. Minnesota's defense statistically 8th in the Big Ten, giving up 16 points per game, but again, haven't played the greatest competition in the world. Then given their run game struggles, to cover or to win, going to have a huge game from Drake Lindsey. He is a player capable. Impressive first-year starter stats, 66% completion rate, 240 yards a game, 7 TDs, 2 interceptions. So, pretty good. PFF has him ranked really highly. The issue is the offensive line for Minnesota is statistically pretty good, but the right guard is ranked really poorly. So going to have their hands full against that elite defensive line for Ohio State. And then the other thing, in Minnesota's red zone success, they're only 91st successfully in red zone. And Ohio State has the nation's #1 red zone defense. So for Minnesota to cover this, they are going to have to figure out how to penetrate that #1 red zone defense for Ohio State. It's just going to be a hard thing to do. So my call on this, again, perfect setting for Ohio State to open it up. Early, it might be a little bit of a struggle for sure. But against that one-dimensional offense for Minnesota is going to need some turnovers here too. They're only +2 though for the year. So it's not like they have a ball hawking defense like they've had in the past. So I'm calling for Ohio State to win, JR, 42 to Minnesota 10. That's a 32-point victory. And covering the spread, I have a high confidence on this one.
I just don't understand what you and Zach see that make you think this Ohio State team is going to open it up at all. I mean, what reason do they have to do so? What have we seen from them to make them think that they're going to do this? This is an Ohio State team that last year was comfortable with just sitting on the defense and running the ball, and they've shown nothing but the same this year. So I get it's a home game and it's at night, but Julian Sayin doesn't throw the ball downfield a ton. He's very good when he does, but only 9 deep shots so far this year. I guess I just don't understand you and Zach's confidence that Ohio State's going to score over 40 points in this game, because unless there's turnovers, sure, if they get a couple pick sixes, sure, but I just don't see where the confidence is. Ohio State has one of the slowest paces of play in all of college football, and Minnesota is bottom 15 in pace of play as well. I predicted Ohio State to get to 31, and I'm not even sure they get to that, because the pace of play in this game is just going to be so slow.
Yeah, I think their pace of play has been slow, dictated by playing Texas and Washington and wanting to keep the ball out of the hands, especially of Washington. The reality too is that first drive, Ryan Day, if he gets ahead, he gets more aggressive. Once he advances it past the 40-yard line, he gets aggressive. So his aggressiveness often is dictated by score early and also where he is on the field. One of the reasons I think they're going to get more aggressive, and don't get me wrong, when I say get more aggressive, I'm not saying Julian Sayin is going to be throwing the ball 40 times in this game. I'm saying they're going to open it up more than they have. And I think they know they need to do that, because when they play the Oregons of the world, I don't know if that conservative play is going to work like that. I don't know if in the playoffs, if they play a Mississippi, if that's going to work like that. So it's a matter of degree, JR. When I say open it up, I don't mean jacking the ball downfield and everything, but I mean being significantly more aggressive than they have. Now, to your point, if they don't do that in the Minnesota game, then you are 100% right, and that's the way it's going to be the rest of the season. But we're only 4 games into the season, and when you look at who they've played, I don't think they were that super conservative against Ohio. I mean, as an example. So that's my thinking of it. But this game will reveal a lot, JR. Like, if against a team like Minnesota who's limited offensively, right? This is not like they're playing Washington, who is one of the best offenses in the country. And you can make an argument for why Ohio State would want to play slow, keep their offense off the field, keep the defense fresh so they could hound Damon Williams Jr. So that's my thought.
I'll say this last thing and then we can move on. Yes, they were not super conservative against Ohio in the second half, but that's also because Ohio made that a 4-point game in the second half. In the first half, they were pretty conservative. They were content with going in the red zone, and they just didn't convert in the red zone. They were kicking field goals and turning it over on down. So, I guess if that happens again, but even if that happens, they only scored, 37 points? So, we'll see. It'll be interesting.
We'll see.
But we'll see. All right, next one here. Wisconsin at Michigan. Over under in this game on FanDuel is set at 43.5. FanDuel's line has moved up 1 point. Michigan is favored by 17.5 at this point. Now, big question if Billy Edwards will play. If Billy Edwards doesn't play, is it still going to be Danny O'Neal most likely? Or are they going to start their third string guy? Some fans are clamoring for that after Danny O'Neal not playing too well, obviously, the past couple weeks. We'll see what happens, but Jeff, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I felt better when it was 16.5 spread. Going to 17.5 does make a little bit of a difference. What is Wisconsin's identity right now? And just what is the mental state of this team? There's so many questions for Wisconsin. How motivated are they going to be the rest of the year? Like you said, JR, who's going to play quarterback? Their offensive line, can they improve? Because it's kind of like the weakness of the team at this point, and therefore they can't get any run game going. Offense, they rank second to last in the Big Ten in total offense, 324 yards per game. In rushing, Wisconsin is 16th in the Big Ten in rushing, 118 yards per game. It's just terrible. Now they're solid on defense, 8th in the Big Ten, number 1 in the Big Ten and in the nation in rushing defense. They're only giving up 50 yards per game. So obviously that would be something to hang your hat on somewhat. And then meanwhile, Michigan coming out, of course, the bye week and then a big win against Nebraska on the road where they really dominated in the trenches. So that's a good thing for Michigan for the future to think, because that's been their formula in the past. And they're really in a good position. The other thing to say, Michigan, with that win, to make the playoffs, because their schedule is very, very manageable. So let's go into some of the reasons Michigan can cover that. Really bad matchup for Wisconsin, given that Michigan's biggest strength is their defensive line. And right now, Wisconsin's biggest weakness is their offensive line. And then some could argue the quarterback's even a bigger weakness, but I would say it's really the offensive line. And that's not a good combo. The other thing I read, JR, is, they have their center, Jake Renfro, who's questionable, so maybe he could play. They were starting a freshman, but there's a left tackle who thought he was going to be a starter, Davis Henson, and they're sliding him. If Renfro can't go, they're sliding him to start at center. He has not started at center before, is my understanding, at least at the collegiate level. I guess Fickle wants to get a veteran center in there over the freshman, but that's a big question mark. And against a team like Michigan, do you want to be experimenting like that? So there's just all kinds of questions here, JR, on Wisconsin's offensive line. And Michigan's defense has not been spectacular, but they did play Oklahoma, right? Some of these stats are, one team can really take these stats and make them a little bit deceiving, right? And then just from a PFF perspective, if you like Michigan's front, it ranks really well, all 4 players. And Wisconsin's offensive line looks terrible in PFF. So, from multiple dimensions, this is a real mismatch and a real problem for Wisconsin in this game. The second reason, just with Michigan, Justice Haynes, home run hitter. I had him as the newcomer of the year in the Big Ten. He's proven to look like that. He's just a big play threat, can take it to the house at any time. Averages 134 yards per game, 8.1 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. And he can break out a big game. In 3 games, his longest carries has been 59 yards, 75 yards, and 75 yards. So just a home run hitter for sure. And then the little things like Michigan can pile up points, just they get it past the 40. They have a chance for Dominic Zavada, their great field goal kicker, to kick 40 to 55-yard field goals, right? He's 3 of 4 from 40 to 55 yards, basically. So, and Teron Moore won't be afraid to take the points like that when they can. So all that kind of supports reasons why Michigan can cover that 17 and a half. Can Wisconsin cover that? And let's get real here and not overcomplicate things. This Wisconsin offense is not going to score much at all. So the Wisconsin defense has to play lights out and totally shut down that run game in Justice Haynes. That's the formula for Wisconsin to cover here. And it's not a crazy scenario because Michigan's offensive line definitely beat Nebraska's offensive line, but they struggled against Oklahoma. I question how good that Michigan line is despite playing so well against Nebraska. Nebraska has a lot of new defensive line starters. Wisconsin's defensive line ranks really well on PFF. Their defensive ends, Daryl Peterson's second in the Big Ten as far as defensive ends in defensive statistics, and then Mason Rieger is 5th overall. So they have dudes up front, Wisconsin does, that really can potentially bottle up. And then Michigan's best offensive lineman, Andrew Sprague. He's 37th best offensive lineman in the Big Ten, and that's the best PFF offensive lineman Michigan's had. So when you get granular, JR, on Michigan's line, not so impressive, right? Despite them looking so good against Nebraska. So I think the key is there, though. The challenge is, Michigan is a kind of boom or bust running game. Justice Haynes will have like stuff 2 yards, only 3 yards, whatever, and then bam, have that big run. So they're going to have to contain the big runs. That's easier said than done because Michigan's all about keep pounding, and that big run is just going to happen, just going to appear all of a sudden. And that's why they just believe in continuing to pound the rock. If they can bottle it up, though, you're relying on Underwood, young quarterback for Michigan, throw the ball down the field. He doesn't have very good weapons. He's only completing 57% of his passes. And this is not disparaging. He's just a freshman, right? A true freshman, only averaging 183 yards per game and just 2 passing touchdowns on the year and 1 interception. So this game, the covering the 17 is all about Wisconsin's run defense. They have to shut down the Michigan run game. Can't prevent. Maybe they can give up one big run, JR, because I don't think they can totally bottle up Michigan, but they can't give up 2 long touchdowns, and that includes the running ability of Underwood. So what's my call on this? I just think it's too tall of a task. When I look at this, I say, first of all, let's work backwards. How much can Wisconsin score against that Michigan defense? I think 10 points is the most. So if you say Wisconsin is going to score 10, that means Michigan has to score 28 points to cover. I think they can do it. I think they can cover that. I'm calling Michigan to score 31 points. Wisconsin scores 10. They play really good defense here, but there's enough big plays from the Michigan offense, and then even getting some of the plays from the legs of Underwood. The variable here, does Billy Edwards Jr. play? Even if he does, and I'm not convinced Wisconsin's covered, but it certainly gives them a better chance. But I give medium confidence here for Michigan to cover that 17.5 points.
All right, makes sense. Yeah, a lot of the same points Zach and I discussed, so agree with your stuff there. Let's move on to Illinois at Purdue, Ross-Ade Stadium. Illinois going to try to go in and avenge their only 1-point win last year. They did get the win, but Purdue was able to come back on them. On FanDuel, you can get Illinois at a favorite at 9.5 right now, and then the over/under on this game going to be a high-scoring affair. FanDuel thinks 55.5 on that. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
So this Purdue, 2-2 overall, really a pleasant surprise under Barry Odom. I think all of us feel that Purdue's better than we thought for sure. Coming off a bye here after losing to Notre Dame 56-30. Illinois, we all know they've had 2 huge mentally taxing games, like the loss at Indiana that they were hyped up for, so disappointed, but then come back and just a great coaching job. Just, it was a pride game and playing really emotional and so well against USC. So that makes this game really interesting, from a mental perspective, JR. So So let's get into it. So why Illinois can cover? I have two reasons here. Just Purdue's defense has badly struggled against good offenses. And with a good quarterback like Luke Altmaier, Illinois is going to put points on the board against Purdue, and that over-under kind of reflects what FanDuel and Vegas thinks of that. Purdue ranks 16th in Big Ten defense. They give up 360 yards a game in pass defense, that is, and then the run defense is also 15th. Now, to be fair, Purdue has played two of their four opponents are top 20 offensively in the nation. So USC is third in the nation in offense, and Notre Dame is 16th in the nation. So again, when you're talking short sample size, that can mean Purdue's defense maybe isn't as bad as we think. But the numbers are the numbers, right? So, for Altmaier, it's all about being given time. He had no time against Indiana whatsoever. If you give him time, I like Altmaier a lot. I just don't believe in still that right side of the Illinois offensive line, but they called a game plan that took advantage of what they could do well. But if you give Altmaier time, he's definitely going to hurt Purdue, get their yardage, and put up some points. Number two is, I think Illinois, they statistically play average. They're basically giving up as many yards as they're gaining. Now, some of that has to do with the huge numbers that Indiana put up, but it is what it is. But they're +5 on the year in turnovers. That's 17th in the nation in turnover margin. They have 8 takeaways and only 3 giveaways. And then Purdue's 126 worst in the nation in turnover margin at -5. Ryan Brown is giving up 6 interceptions, JR. So, win in the margins, right? Win the turnover battle, and everything points to Illinois will be able to do that. They have the more experienced quarterback. Ryan Brown's still young, still makes some poor throws, right? And so that's why the two reasons Illinois can cover. Why take the points with Purdue? I have kind of two reasons here. Illinois' defense has been average. I mean, they gave up a ton of yards to Indiana, a ton to USC, and Purdue's offense has been the strength of the team. I think they can keep up with Illinois, but the key thing is if they don't turn the ball over. That is the number one important thing in this game. If Purdue turns it over, they're dead. They're not going to cover that. And the other thing is, Illinois last 2 games, they've given up an average of 49 points. They've given up 1,069 yards. So 579 to Indiana. It wasn't that much better against USC. They gave up 490 yards to USC. So this Illinois defense, hopefully they're going to get a little healthier, but they're still banged up, I understand. So that really gives Purdue a good chance to score is the bottom line. And then I go back, JR, to the emotional 2 straight emotional top 20 games for Illinois. Purdue's had the bye week. It's at home. They're going to be chomping at the bit to play hard and everything. What is the mental state for Illinois? So this is where coaching comes into play here, getting your team up to play. But there's only so much coaching you can do on the mental side, I believe. So I believe on the mental side, it really does favor Purdue in this case. So what's my call? I'm going to believe that Purdue, especially JR, having taken Illinois to overtime last year, they're going to come in this game not believing they can win the game, right? So I think that's a pretty big deal. They're going to hold the mental edge. I still think Illinois wins the game just because I believe in Luke Altmaier and the coaching staff. Again, Illinois is a top 25 team, and top 25 teams should win games like this. I'm calling it Illinois 34, Purdue 27. So Illinois is going to win the game, but not cover that spread. It's just too high for my blood. I'm giving a fairly low confidence on this one.
All right. We got some Illinois fans. They seem, Thomas Jonas seems confident Illini will cover. Illini Bubba says the Illini defense is a true bend but don't break. Aaron Henry will give up some yards but less points. Yeah, you're hoping for some turnovers in the red zone like Purdue had against USC, possibly to keep their scoring down. Purdue, good offense this year. Good wide receivers. Offensive line isn't great, but Ryan Brown and some of the stuff they do with him, it'll be a really nice test for Illinois' defense, and we'll see how that goes. So, sorry, Thomas. He says he's a Hoosier. Sorry, Thomas. Did not mean to get your team affiliation wrong there. I know that's a cuss word to some fans to get their affiliation wrong. Sorry, Thomas. And Blue Wolverine is here. No mystery who Blue Wolverine is a fan of. Giving us the eyeball emojis there. Appreciate you being here, Blue Wolverine. All right, let's get to second last game here, Jeff. I think this is probably the most interesting game of the weekend. You have Washington traveling out to Maryland on FanDuel. Washington's favored by 6.5. The over/under set at 54.5 in this one. Washington dealing with some injuries. Left tackle Carver Willis, defensive edge Zach Durfee out for this one most likely. Looks like Jacob Manu still coming back from his injury. He was limited last game. We'll see if he's full strength yet. And then Takario Davis, he is still in question if he will return. So, and then the going cross country. They won their road game against Washington State. That gives them some confidence, but going cross country again, we saw what that trip did to them last year when they went to Rutgers. Going to be a very interesting game in this one. Jeff, what is your call?
This is a tough one because there's so much going on beyond the field of play in this one. And JR knows I've been texting him on this. This is the one I'm struggling the most. I would not bet this one, by the way. Don't bet this. But because we're choosing the 5 most compelling games, so we have to choose it, right? This mentally it reminds me of the Illinois at Purdue side of things. So you got Washington 3-1 overall, highly anticipated game against Ohio State. They lost, they're going to have the emotional letdown, 22 game home winning streak gone. And then they have to travel 2,800 miles across the country, right, to play a Maryland team coming off a bye. And remember last year, Washington was terrible on the road, 0-5 on the road. They lost by 3 to Rutgers, 24 to Iowa, 14 to Indiana, 29 to Penn State, and 28 to Oregon. That average loss, they averaged 20 points a game losing last year in those 5 losses. So this is a great test for the growth and maturity of Jedd Fisch in this Washington program. They face Maryland. So Mike Locksley, 0-9 coming off bye weeks, right? And we're into the month of October, right, JR? Mike Locksley, great in September. Once you get in October, who knows? So just so much going on here. I just don't love this game. Let's get into the more specifics, though. Why take the points with Washington? So 2 reasons. Despite being shut down by Ohio State, you heard earlier, Ohio State has an elite, probably the best defense in the nation. No shame there. I just think that Washington's offense is still really well balanced. 3 different making stars. So they have answers. If you want to shut down Jonah Coleman, they can throw the ball. If you want to shut down the run, they can run the ball. And if that doesn't work, run Damon Williams Jr. So, teams that are multi-dimensional, they have answers to what other teams are trying to do. And I love that in Washington, right? I do think Damon Williams Jr., is going to be a difference here. The difference between this year and last year, Washington being 0-5, I think Damon Williams Jr. is just a really good quarterback that just gives you a lot more potential in your game planning. I expect Washington to try to run the ball. The running game travels just like defense travels, right? So Jonah Coleman, you're going to get a healthy dose of him this week, especially since last week he was kind of bottled up despite one early big run against Ohio State. And Washington's still 5th in the Big Ten in offense, despite that struggle against Ohio State. 6th in Big Ten passing. They've got the big play receiver in Denzel Boston. 5th in Big Ten rushing. So just so well balanced. And then the other thing, Maryland has a bad run offense and is over-reliant on the passing game. So, unlike Washington, Maryland's one-dimensional, right? They're reliant on the pass. So I think that's going to make it easier for Washington to say, okay, here's what we need to do to contain them, because let's take away what they do best, right? Which is their passing game. And I think that is easier when you're not well balanced. Maryland's last in the Big Ten in rushing, 103 yards per game. And not only that, only 3.3 yards per carry. And that's against some weak teams too. That's terrible rushing, to be frank. They have a terrible rushing game. So, JR, that kind of is the big worry for them. And just not
to a Maryland podcast, they know it too, Jeff. I mean, they're not being fooled here.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let's get into why Maryland can cover. I actually have more reasons for them to cover. I have three. The passing attack under Maryland, Washington, it's legit. Sixth in the Big Ten. And then they're going against that Washington secondary that is banged up. I've heard from some people they think Dakario Davis will play, but it is an unknown, right? But if he would play, that's a pretty big deal. They average 266 yards per game. Maryland does. He is only completing 60% of his passes, but he only has one interception. So that's a big thing. And then, solid PFF grades. I think they rank him 9th in the Big Ten as far as passers, JR, for Malik Washington. But as a freshman, that's impressive nonetheless. And Washington's pass defense is mid-level. They're 9th in the Big Ten, so kind of in the middle of the road. So Maryland, what's really driving it, despite Washington doing pretty well, it's that defense, that young defensive line playing really well. They have the potential, and you need a really good defensive line to shut down a good offense. So that is the one thing where you could argue Maryland could really slow down that Washington multi-dimensional offense. If you look at all four of Maryland's defensive linemen per PFF, they have a 7th rated Big Ten defender and tackle Cam Rice, and then their ends, which are young, Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis, they're 22nd and 24th among all defensive linemen in PFF rankings. So they're legit, JR. That defensive line is really good. And then what I put this in Maryland's favor, of course, is Washington traveling after that emotional game, right? Are they going to get up for this game against Maryland like they are going to need to, because Maryland is much better than people think? So I just think Maryland will have the mental edge here. It is good, JR. This game is at 3:30 Eastern, so that's 12 Pacific, noon. If this were one of those noon games, that would be a bigger deal and cause me to lean more toward Maryland. And bottom line is, you bettors out there, if you're taking the better team, it's Washington. They'll cover the 6.5, no problem. If you go by trends and everything like that and the travel, you go for Maryland. I'm going against the trends. I'm going with the better team. I'm going in my belief in Damon Williams Jr. So I'm taking Washington here, 31-23. So they're going to win by 8. My confidence is low. Don't bet this game. I'm going with my gut. Any thoughts on that, JR?
I like how we have a theme here. Don't bet these games. They're
No, I said earlier I like Ohio State. But I think we're serving people here to say, what are we really confident in, right? And that you might want to bet. I mean, hell, my nephew, he takes all 5 games. I choose JR, and he bets all 5 of them. Just so I got like extra pressure.
Parlay it. Call it the Jeff parlay every week. All right, just put like a buck on it. Do the Jeff parlay. See how much you have at the end of the season. Let us know. Okay.
Heck, if FanDuel allowed betting in Georgia, I'd be doing that myself on FanDuel.
There you go. Thomas says he means the Terps receivers with a lot of drops. The Washington would be much better with stickier hands. I don't know. Some Maryland fans might disagree with me, but I think Malik's more of the issue with the drops so far this season. He has some passes that are just pretty inaccurate to those guys. I know on the stat sheet, and you look at PFF and stuff, it shows a lot of drops, but at least from what I've seen,
they'll rate JR like a pass that's behind you, but they probably rate that a drop. But that's a tough one.
I mean, there are ones that are hitting their hands, no doubt, and they should catch those. But it's not like these are all passes that are like straight into the hands and then boom, just falls down. And these are not like all contested catches that they go up for and they don't ever come down with them. I actually think the Maryland receivers have made some pretty spectacular catches this season so far. I mean, there was one behind one of the guys where he reached out with his one hand and kind of tipped it to himself and grabbed it. That was pretty impressive. So Thomas, you are right. There are drops, a lot of drops so far this season, but I just would say I don't know if that's all on the receivers. I think some of that is Washington and his accuracy a little bit, which will come with time. We'll see if it gets there this game or not, but Yeah. So, last one here, Jeff. Your Michigan State. Oh, let me bring the comment down there. Michigan State at Nebraska. This was the game that I did around the Big Ten last night. Which, by the way, if you haven't gone and watched that, go watch Around the Big Ten. Had a lot of fun with Rajiv, the Darker Knight, and Kevin. They're talking about. They all picked this game as the most likely upset this week. Nebraska favored by 11.5 on FanDuel. The over/under set at 50.5 here. They like Michigan State going on the road. They're not as high as on Nebraska as everybody kind of once was after the season began. Questionable about that Nebraska offensive line, the defensive line of Nebraska as well. Jeff, what's your call on this one?
So this one has some interesting stats I'll get into. That spread has been going up too, right, JR? I think it was 10.5 yesterday. So money going toward Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Coming off the loss to Michigan, they're off a bye week, but now they have big questions about how good they are in the trenches on both sides of the ball, right? We know Michigan's defensive line is legit and really good. So no surprise there that Nebraska's offensive line struggled. But, Michigan's offensive line, I still think they're kind of average. They kind of dominated Nebraska. So that's a major concern for them. And just turning to Michigan State, 3-1 overall. 2 weeks ago, played USC 45-31. This could be a key game for them getting to the 6 wins to make a bowl game for sure. Michigan State 1-3 against the spread. Nebraska's 2-2. Well, let's get into those stats. So, why Nebraska can cover? 2 reasons. So, first, and it's interesting, Nebraska's passing attack looks like a total mismatch against Michigan State's passing defense. And that implies Nebraska's going to put up big-time points. So Nebraska's 4th in the Big Ten in total offense. They lead the Big Ten in passing offense, and Nebraska, JR, is 2nd in the nation in passing offense. 352 yards per game. I mean, that shocked me, that 2nd in the nation, right? I mean, I could see the Big Ten stat. And meanwhile, Michigan State's pass defense is dead last in the Big Ten, giving up 264 yards per game. So that stat points to Nebraska should have a lot of success throwing the ball. Raiola is thriving in his 2nd year under Dana Holgerson's offense. I think what's most impressive to me, JR, about Raiola is 11 TDs and only 1 interception, whereas that ratio last year was 13 TDs and 11 interceptions. I don't think Raiola has been awesome, but just the fact he's taking care of the ball is huge. He definitely can work on that footwork a little bit better, but huge improvement. And he's got weapons to throw to, right? 5 different players, over 100 yards receiving. Just Ja'Cory Barney Jr. is his number 1 target. Number 2 reason Nebraska can cover that 11.5. Their run defense is a major weakness, but Michigan State is crummy at running the football. So I'm not sure Michigan State is equipped to take advantage of what Michigan did, right? Which is just abuse that Nebraska run defense. Nebraska's 2nd to last in the Big Ten in run defense, 173 yards per game. But more importantly, they gave up 5.2 yards per carry. That's not good. That's 123rd in the nation. And so that's really bad. And they gave up 8.7 yards per carry to Michigan. Some of that was due to the explosive plays, though, that we talked about earlier for Michigan. Michigan State, kind of middle of the pack in rushing, 154 yards a game. But they're kind of committed to the run, only 4.3 yards per carry. So Jonathan Smith is still running the ball just because he knows that is a formula for success, but they're not that successful. Their top ball carrier only has 4.7 yards per carry. And against a fairly easy schedule, non-conference, that's really not that great. Aiden Childs does aid that rushing attack, 154 yards, but the numbers don't speak to being able to take advantage of that Nebraska's weakness in the run defense. I have 3 reasons, JR, for why to take Michigan State. So I just mentioned all about how Michigan State has the worst pass defense, and therefore Nebraska is going to have great success. I think that could be overstated how weak that pass defense is, JR. They've played 2 of the top 5 passing offenses in the nation. If you've only played 4 games, I think statistically that's going to affect you, right? So they played Boston College. Did you know Boston College has the number 4 passing team in the nation, 345 yards a game? USC, this is no surprise, number 5 in the nation, 338 yards per game. So really, no doubt Nebraska is really good, but it is overstated how bad. I'm not saying Michigan State has a good pass defense, but it's not as bad as it seems based on the 2 opponents they played. And if you look at PFF, so I looked at PFF, their cornerbacks aren't bad. They rank 21st among Big Ten cornerbacks, Malcolm Bell, and the other guy, Joshua Eaton, is 33rd. That's not that bad, right? That's about in the middle. Their weaknesses, their safeties rank really bad in pass defense coverage. So again, I think that could be overstated how well Nebraska could throw on them. And then Nebraska appears to have a great passing defense that should contain quarterback Aiden Childs, but I think that also has been driven by Nebraska's schedule. So I think Michigan State will have success throwing the ball. Nebraska leads the nation and the Big Ten in pass defense, 76 yards per game, but they've played Akron, who ranks 106th in passing, Michigan, who ranks 104th. They played Houston Christian. I had never even heard of them before this year. And Cincinnati, who actually passes pretty well, 25th. But really, the schedule, I think, is dictating their Nebraska's great pass defense. Again, not saying they're bad, but this is where you need to look beyond the initial statistics, I guess. And then if you look at PFF, Nebraska's quarterbacks and safeties, they're average in pass coverage. Defensive line, not bad, but really the best pass rush player in the Big Ten for Nebraska doesn't appear to until number 51. That's Deshaun McCullough, who used to be at Indiana, then Oklahoma. He's the best pass rushing statistically person at 51. So not that impressive, right? So I think Aiden Childs is going to be able to have success. He's throwing to an alpha receiver, Nick Marsh. Has another good target, Omari Kelly, 317 yards receiving. So I think the third thing, red zone success will be a key for Michigan State to keep up the scoring. They rank strong in that area. Michigan State ranks 31st in red zone efficiency. That's 5th in the Big Ten. In 17 red zone trips, JR, Michigan State has 12 TDs. That's pretty damn good, right? So I think that's going to be a key. Nebraska ranks well, but they only have allowed 4 red zone trips. Part of that is they were giving up huge touchdowns to Michigan, right? I mean, and then it reflects their weak schedule as well. So really, red zone is going to be a key here. So what's my call, JR? Under Matt Rule, Nebraska struggled to put teams away. I think 11.5. That's awfully high here. The pass defense for Nebraska appears great, but I think my research shows maybe not as much. So I think the Spartans are going to keep it up with the Nebraska here in scoring. I'm calling this my Lock City pick of the week. Nebraska to win, but Michigan State to cover. Calling it 31-24. Nebraska wins. Confidence high that Michigan State can cover the 11.5.
All right, good stuff. We will see how that one plays out. Tough to pick an upset in this week here, so we will see what happens. I'm sure there will be surprises, just like there seems to be every week in college football, and there should be more that come this week. So, Jeff, thanks for coming in, and thanks for talking through the games with us, reviewing your picks and everything. Anything else you got before we get out of here?
Reminder. Full write-up on this with all the stats on bigjeffsfootball.com, posted earlier today. Looks like I need to clean up a little bit on my review from last year. There were some formatting things, JR, but it's all out there for everyone to read every week, of course, and always great to join you, my friend.
Very good. Yes, thank you very much. All right, everybody, go check out Big Jeff's website and everything, and we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate everybody who came in and listened, and go follow Jeff on Twitter, social, all those different places as well, at Big Jeff's FT Ball as well. You can follow me at JR's_rankings, and I just got word from Sam. He is able to record tonight now, so you guys should have a College Football with Sam episode tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. premiering. We're going to go through my mid-season predictions for for the Big Ten teams. Sam's going to either say he agrees, he disagrees. We'll see what Sam has to say, and it'll be some fun conversation to get to. All right, Jeff, thanks for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.